We started cover cropping, this will be our third year, going into our third year. So we've got 2 years behind us. We found out about cover crops from Billy Sink at Seeds for Bees. We were at a Blue Diamond Growers meeting and he gave a presentation about cover crops. And that was the first time that I'd ever known about cover crops or heard about cover crops. So after that point, I did a lot of research on my own to find out more what cover crop benefits and things to keep in mind for planting the cover crops, any concerns that may come about. So it's been, it seems like longer, but it's been 2 years and it's been a good 2 years so far. Basically, there's two methods you can do. Is a broadcast method where you just have a spreader that shoots it out in the rows. It's not as neat and clean as having it planted with a seed drill. So we don't have a seed drill, so I had to ask around. I asked my orchard manager if he knew somebody, and so after some phone calls, he was able to find somebody that could plant in our first year with a seed drill, which keeps it in nice rows, in a nice and neat looking order. It doesn't shoot out into the berms of the trees. Much more efficient method of planting versus spreading, but spreading's okay too. At the end of the day, it seemed like the drill method was better for us in the orchard, so that's specifically what we use. And the planting of it is fairly straightforward with the drill, and so the drill method. So pretty simple. I mean, some people have their own drill so they could do it themselves, or spreader. And in our case, we don't, so we just hired it out, and it was pretty easy to find somebody and have them do it. So when you have legumes, particularly in your mix, you can inoculate the seeds with the beneficial microbes. It's just like a powder, and you just basically mix it in with your seeds in our case, a drill that we're using. And what that will do is help the seeds get established in the soil. Those microbes help. And I'm not, can't explain it scientifically, but they've been able to show that when you inoculate the seeds pre-planting, that it'll help get them established and the cover crops established better. Yeah, you don't need to do anything really in particular to get it established. Sometimes if you plant it when it's still really hot and the ground is still really solid, it's hard to really get the seeds to penetrate in. And that has happened to us on another orchard that has really compacted soils. But in the end, the crop still grew fine. It just took a little bit longer to establish once we got some rains, but didn't seem to harm it too much or prevent it from eventually growing. It's really, once you get after the harvest, you get some post-harvest work done on the orchard floor. Get some of those things done first. Our orchard manager likes to roll over the cover crop once it's been planted so it's flat again, the orchard floor, because as you'll see out in the field, you'll see the lines, and a lot of orchards, almond growers don't like to have that, so you just roll over it again to flatten it out and before the seed gets established. Don't have to do that, but that's something that growers may want to do. Other concerns with getting it established is rain. Last year, it wasn't until I think Thanksgiving that we got a significant amount of rainfall to get it established. So it took longer for the cover crop to start growing, and timing that with the bloom doesn't always work out that way. But we have micro sprinklers, so it doesn't really cover the whole orchard floor. So that's why we didn't get necessarily a uniform growth across, but it was fine in the end, not a big deal. Another concern people have is, can they do their other orchard maintenance, like pruning, heavy pruning, December, January, and we do that, and it didn't get in the way. The cover crops maybe 6 inches or so, depending on the growth and the type of crop you have. So you just drive right over the edges of it in our case, and it didn't seem to affect it too much. If you drive over too much, you may lose a little bit on the edges of the, maybe a foot on each side, but that's okay. We have another 10 feet of cover crop that's just fine. So those are the main concerns that we had and other growers have up front, but it didn't seem to be any particular problem. I think we are seeing some benefits to the cover crops. Again, we're only 2 years in, but a few that I have seen, particularly here on this orchard, is we have a sandy loam soil. So during harvest, it gets really dusty. And I've noticed it improving a little bit on that because we have, the cover crops have established a roots, shallow and deep root system that really has started to get the soil less compacted, less dusty. The root structure really helps retain some of the dust and just improve the soil structure so that come harvest, it's not quite as dusty as it was. We're still a little ways away from where I want to be, but I have noticed a difference in the lessening of the dust during harvest. Another is the beneficial insects that it helps bring in and attract, especially around March, April, when the flowering starts to take place, or at least be in full bloom of the cover crop. You just walk through and you see all these different insects that, you know, are mostly good. And not only that, but the bees. It's after the bees for the pollination are gone, you get the local bees, the native bees that come in, and it's just amazing. I mean, you just see all kinds of insects, and can contrast that to orchards that don't have any cover crops, and it's a whole different environment. It's lifeless almost. So I noticed that as well. And water retention, when we have the cover crops established, and once the weather starts to warm up, I like to take a shovel and dig where the cover crop is, especially after we haven't had rain in a little while and it's still a moist soil texture, and lots of worm activity, earthworm activity, which is a good sign of soil health. And then contrast that with an area that's not covered in the cover crop, just a bare area by the a little bit further away, and it's drier, not much, if any, earthworm activity. So I can see in that sense how it can really benefit the soil health and life in the soil, which is what we want. We want more life and beneficial microorganisms in the soil, and that to me was a good visual that it's doing its job. And some of these cover crops grow like 5-6 feet high. So I was thinking, okay, how's our tractor going to get through? We do quite a bit of foliar spraying during the growing season. And so I thought, you know, I kept asking my orchard manager, is that going to be a problem? And he said, no, it's been fine. I mean, we just drive over it and they just pop right back up, the flowers and the plants, and it doesn't terminate them. Driving the tractor, the middle part of it, the tires will roll over it, but the edges, but it has not been an issue. And I was glad to see that, because I was concerned that they were going to get too big and in the way. So on that end, it has not been an issue with being able to drive your tractor over it and get your foliar spraying, orchard maintenance done. Not an issue for us. Ways that it helps improve the orchard or other benefits, less weed pressure. Forgot to mention that. That was a pretty big one, especially in the middle of where the flowers and the plants are located. Very few weeds because the cover crop seems to crowd them out. So less spraying for weeds that we've had to do, which was very good to see. But some concerns are, will the cover crop take over like a weed? And it has not. I mean, especially when you plant it with a drill, it stays right where it needs to be. Doesn't get into the berms by the trees. So that would make it harder to terminate at the end. So that was a concern that really didn't come to happen. And just trying to think, there really hasn't been, it's really low maintenance. To sum it up, it's just low maintenance. You just, once you plant it, just let it grow. You don't need to water it, and just let it rely on rainwater. And then throughout the growing season, if for some reason it does get in your way, you can terminate it, and that's okay, or terminate every other row. With almonds, we like to shake the trees for the mummies around December, January during the wet season, and let them go on the orchard floor. Then you mow it to grind them up. But what we're seeing is that you don't have to do that. The cover crop apparently will help decompose the mummies itself, so you don't have to mow the cover crop in order to get to the mummies. That's what we're seeing so far, and we're going to continue on with that and see how it goes. But so far, it kind of kills two birds with one stone by not having to mow the mummies, because the cover crop will kind of take care of that for you. So we have been terminating by just mowing it, which springtime, we usually terminate April, end of April, early May, depending on just if we're getting enough rain throughout April. We'll just keep it going until it starts to, we see it dry out a little bit, and then we'll terminate it at that point. So typically April to early May is the latest that we'll terminate. Some people like to spray, but I don't think you need to. That's just an extra expense that you don't need to do. So once you mow it, it terminates, and not much grows back. Maybe here and there you'll see a little bit, but it doesn't get in your way. So we'll mow it and just let it decompose on the orchard floor. What I'm thinking of doing this year is mowing it and having it spread to the berms to act as a mulch and help suppress weeds. So I may try that on maybe half the orchard and see how that does, and then the other half just let it sit on the middle of the orchard floor and just compare it and see if there's any downside to having it spread to the berms. But now a third way is you can mow and rototill it into the soil and let it benefit the soil that way. We have not done that yet. That's something that I'll consider in the future, but we just haven't done that yet. And I've heard people like that, and it's just kind of depends on what's easier, what you want to do, what your goals are with the cover crop. So I would say that's a third way of terminating it for people. The Seeds for Bees program takes a lot of the guesswork out, especially if you're new to cover crops like I was. So I didn't know which cover crop mix, what to put in, and Seeds for Bees has pre-mixed varieties for you. So the first year I planted strictly the mustard mix, which has mustard grass mixes in with radish, and primarily that. And I just did primarily that mix the first year. It seemed like what a lot of people go with. So I thought, and I see that out in orchards a lot. So I thought, why not try that? And that's good. I mean, it gets established fairly easy, and it seems to bloom just right around the same time as the pollination for our almond trees. When those start to bloom, it seems to be one of the earlier blooming varieties or mixes that they have. So that was nice. Easy to terminate, easy to manage, no issues with that. The second year I tried their soil builder mix, which has a little bit more diversity. So it has a lot of legumes, has some mustard and some radish, and some triticale. So there's nitrogen fixing plants in there, which is great because almond growers need nitrogen. So it's another source of free nitrogen for our trees to utilize. And then it also has plants that are helpful for the beneficial microbes in the soil, like mycorrhizal fungi. Some of these mixes, like the soil builder, can help get those established, and that helps break down the nutrients in the soil for the trees to use. So it's just another way of providing extra free fertilizer that the soil builder mix can provide. So I went with that the second year, and I'm going again with that the third year this year, because I was very happy with the way it turned out. And it's also great for pollinizing. The bees really liked the variety of the flowers that it provided. So it kind of covered all the bases of what I was looking to have here at the orchard, which is relieve soil compaction, which is a big problem for us because the soil builder mix has some plant varieties that have deep tap roots that will help break up that soil a little bit more. So that was nice to see. And then also the diversity of flowers, which brought in a lot of beneficial insects and help improve water retention in our orchard. So it was a good variety for us, and I think it's, again, low maintenance too, which a lot of people will like.
Leslie Miller out of north of Modesta, and I've been planting cover crop since 1995. I started out with 6-foot drills. 3 years ago I developed this 12-foot drill. Soil preparation or seed bed is probably one of the most important parts, and what I tried to do with this machine was do something that I could get most of the orchards and get the seed in good enough. I like to plant like this post-harvest. It's sandy, I can get in it good. There are some orchards that are hard enough that I can't get plant a seed bed, or a good enough seed bed that I can really do a good job. So sometimes I recommend that they work the ground. I mean, some of the stuff is almost like asphalt. I mean, it's hard, and I can't do it. Now, if I had a 100 horsepower tractor and a drill that weighed twice as much as this, and then I need a semi to haul it almost. Well, so I'm trying to stay small enough and nimble enough that I can get around in an orchard without having a lot of high horsepower, and I like the maneuverability of the short wheelbase. That it makes it easier because, hey, if I'm not making a groove in the ground and dropping seed, it's not working. Last year they didn't get enough rain at bloom time. Almond bloom time, the stuff was only 2 or 3 inches high because they didn't get any rain. Last year, the way the rain was, some cover crops were kind of delayed and getting a good start because it was dry early on. One year, I don't know, it's been 10 or 15 years ago, I had about 200 acres that I'd planted, and I forget now the year, but we didn't get any appreciable rain after harvest until the second week in January. And at 200 acres, I was amazed it all come up and come up in good form. That year in September, I think we had 3/4 of an inch during harvest. So somebody that started last year might find, well, they don't know about it. Well, the reason because it didn't germinate and come up well. Well, it was partly the timing of the rain. And I don't know, all cover crop last year didn't seem to jump, except there was some places where I planted where there was farming and they had solid set sprinklers, and they've still got them. And they redone the orchard and the soil was tight, and they had 100% coverage. They had one whale of a cover crop. I planted it first part of October, and a week later, the stuff was 2.5, 3 inches high. It was triticale, the late season stuff, and the ground, the soil temperature was still warm, and it had water, and it had sunlight, and it come up and just it done what that's the second year that I've planted there, and it actually is used to be my PCA when I was farming. And they had water penetration problems, so that's what they put in to help get water to go down quicker.
We didn't get any rain, really substantial rain, until December, so it was just sitting there. And parts of the sprinklers do catch it, but it really is not a significant amount. So we're just at the mercy of nature, and whenever it rains, that's when it gets set. So it was just sitting here for about a good month and a half. And so that's why there really isn't as much to see here as usual as a typical year. This is our third year of cover crops. So you have some areas that have decent growth, but I would say a majority of the orchard looks like what you may see here. And it's maybe, 4 inches of growth off the ground. What we have here, I planted the whole orchard the same cover crop mix. So that mix consists of triticale, which I believe is this grass-looking plant. And then we have some peas right here. And we have some beans and some mustard grass and radish. So let's see, I pulled up a radish here just a minute ago, just to show you kind of what it looks like. It's a little baby radish right now, but by April, hopefully it's going to be a lot bigger. And what's good about radish is it helps break up soil compaction because it gets nice and big and deep, like a deep taproot. So we have a lot of soil compaction issues here. So that's one of the reasons why I like having radish, is that it helps break it up. And and then mustard grass, I think I mentioned, which you see a few of it flowering here. That's one of the first plants to flower. So there'll be a little bit something for the bees, which we just got the bees here at the orchard about a week ago. So there isn't much for them to feed on right now, but maybe towards the middle to end of pollination, we'll have more flowers from the cover crops. We'll see. Once the weather warms up, then it really starts to take off. So even though it doesn't look like much right now, in about a month, it could be a significant amount of growth then. At least that's how last year went. So it's a learning process every year, but it's enjoyable. And I just love to see little changes year to year. For example, what you see after rain are some of these, a lot of worm castings. So a lot of worm activity. You see, like right here, a lot of this is worm castings. So evidence that there's a lot of earthworms coming up, and this provides really good fertilizer for the soil. And a couple years ago, we didn't have nearly as much as we see now. So there's just a lot of that this year that I just have not seen before. So little things to notice, but they're good things. It's really low maintenance, and so that's been great. We don't have to really think too much about it. It just does its thing, and we can drive over it, and it is just fine.